Okay, everything is now live and streaming or recorded. So, Mr. Burley, planning and zoning is up first if you're okay.
Yes, I am. Uh,
Okay,
Patty, are you okay, Jack?
Yep.
Okay.
okay, manager's update. I just had two things. The first one is just reminders, there's nothing new on any of them. The second one is just informational right now. I don't have any details, but Aaron from the library had approached me about permission to install some kind of signage indicating the location of the library. And I've asked her for some specifics since we have a sign ordinance. I'm not exactly sure what kind of sign she's looking for and what kind of sign she's looking for. I'm sorry, my phone just went off. What kind of sign she's looking for and whether they're temporary or permanent. So I told her I needed some more information, but I would at least bring it up to let you folks know. I think what she wants to do is install them at the end of Perry, where Perry meets Greensburg Pike. But again, I'm not exactly sure what she's going for. And she said originally she wasn't exactly sure what she wanted to do either, but she wanted me to at least bring it up. So when I get more information, I'll let you know. But I put it under this committee because it could be a sign issue. It may not be, but it could be a sign issue. And since zoning has a sign ordinance as part of it, I thought this was the appropriate place to raise it. So when I have more information, I'll let you know.
Thanks,
Other than that, I don't have anything else, although I did put a note there under Dawn's report, which is coming up about the arborist we use. So I don't know if Dawn, if you want to go ahead and talk about that, or you want me to say something about it.
Yeah, you can do it, Steve.
Okay, well, Dawn and I were talking, as you know, when Ted retired, we had trouble finding an arborist, so we were using Carl's Tree Service with a written agreement that we had with them, and then we've just kind of extended it every year unofficially to use their arborist only when we need to. It hasn't been excessive, but because it's been a few years since the original agreement was made, Dawn and I didn't know if you would want to revisit that or not. Obviously, there are times when we need to have arborist services, especially recently with PennDOT and Duquesne Light doing a number of different things. We need somebody to take a look at trees. That's not the only situation. So we can certainly just continue it as we have been if you'd like, but if you want, you can we can send it out to you and you can revisit it. It's up to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, has Carl's tree service been adequate for us? Have they done things, Don, that we need to do correctly and supporting our cause? Have they been okay? Or
Well, as far as I'm concerned,
Really?
Bill, I don't think we could ask for a better arborist than Carl's Tree Service. I mean, they've been very, very helpful and they're there when we need them. So I hope that you all decide that to keep them.
I wanted to ask a question. Didn't we have a member of our community who works for Bartlett's Tree Service, who is a certified arborist, and also his wife, who live on Avenue F now, who offered volunteer services as arborist? Is it Don?
Yes, we do. We have an alternate. Her name is Rhine.
Rhines, yes.
Andrea Rhine. And she's an alternate on the Tree and Shrub Committee.
But her
And I
husband.
believe her husband is the one that
Yeah.
works for the Bartlett Tree Company.
Yeah, he is a professional arborist and he does nothing but arborists, and there's no vested interest in having trees cut down. And I think I would like to at least confer with them when we have times when arborist evaluations are necessary. I think they have offered that service and I know they are excellent professionally. I've used them to take care of my trees ever since I moved to Forest Hills. So I think it would be helpful to have the advice of an independent arborist on occasion.
does this mean we should probably have an evaluation going on, bids or something going on, you think?
I think we should ask Mr. Rhines what, we need to do to, is there a procedure when we're having like the tree replacement process? I know that went to Tree and Shrub, I believe, for advice on what to be replaced, but it would be helpful, I think, to have a way to secure the services of a professional arborist for replantings and replacements rather
Okay.
than just pruning and cutting.
I agree, Patty. I don't know them very well, but I know you do. So I support how you're feeling. Don, how you feel about it?
Well, that's fine with me, but Carl's is also a professional arborist also, so just keep that in mind. But whatever you decide, it's fine with me.
Should it go to tree and shrub to review?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
That's fine, but this gentleman's wife should not be part of the conversation on tree and shrub.
Okay.
I know she's an alternate, but if she should not participate in the discussion.
Okay.
She's also an arborist as well, I believe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I
Okay.
think we had Ted on, on as our professional arborist for many, many years. And I think we should move toward having, an arborist sort of designated as such, at our command that is, really a professional arborist to our, looking at native trees and, pollinator species support and looking at things that can be advised for planting, for replacing when they have this, massive amount of tree removal going on down on Cascade and so forth. I think we rely on the Tree and Shrub Commission to help us with that, but I think we really need to have a professional arborist who is, with us over a period of time to help with the overall tree canopy management in terms of replacement especially and replantings.
Okay, may I
Okay.
make a comment?
Yes. Who's coming?
Jack.
Yeah, Jack. I didn't. Jack, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Blotted out
Okay.
my screen. Yeah.
Couple thoughts here. I think we're getting a little random. If we want to have a professional arborist or we want to revisit who's handling this issue, I think we should have a more formal procedure than just, well, Carl's is nice or I know this person. And I'm also hearing different agendas, perhaps, about what an arborist should do. So I think we should ask the Tree and Shrub Committee to, if you want to go forward with this discussion, ask the Tree and Shrub Committee to develop a set of criteria about what they want this arborist to be handling, and then a little more formally than we're talking tonight, address people or organizations to be competent to do that for us.
That's fine.
I think it needs to be more structured than we're talking about right now.
Oh, I
Okay.
agree. Yeah, I agree, Jack, because we want to make sure we get everything the way that we want it to have and have the proper people in place. I agree. Any more comments about the?
So can we issue a request to the Tree and Shrub Committee to give us a recommendation for the services of a professional arborist and to develop a charge to them for the maintenance of our tree canopy and replacement of trees that are removed?
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So we're going to be able to do that, you think? All right. Steve, should we pass it
Yeah.
on to Jack? Okay.
Yeah, let's do that, but
Okay.
let's make sure they articulate the goals of that person before they
Dawn-
discuss.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead. Dawn,
No, that's all.
when do they meet next? Tomorrow? Dawn,
Yes,
Do you want to
Yes.
start discussion tomorrow with them, please?
I will do that.
And try to also get an idea in addition, if anybody has any suggestions, is this somebody who is going to volunteer? There are costs involved, et cetera. I mean, that's somewhere maybe down the road, but at least start that process.
What
Yeah.
time do they meet?
11 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Anything more, Don, that you want to say to us?
Yeah, just a couple little items. You've already noticed that the tree work has been done at the Bevington and Fairfax culvert sites. All the trees have been removed, and they haven't yet started on down at Roman Bistro yet, so I don't know when they're going to do that. As far as code enforcement goes, I have a severe problem with 4 complexes that are owned by the same people down on Lenox Avenue, and they're just abusing the rubbish situation. About 2 months ago, I cited them the judge fined them $1,500 in fines, and they never continued to clean up what is taking place right now, but it's very, very bad. And so I recited them again, and I'm still not getting anything done at this time, but it's a situation that has to be taken care of fairly soon. I'd like to ask Mr. Corbel if he has any other suggestions that may be done other than just citing them.
Let's take a look at the solid waste section, Don. There may be opportunities for equitable relief. Like we could go to court and a judge could order them to do what aren't they doing exactly, Don? I don't think
They're just laying the garbage out on the ground. They have a section that they built a concrete pad, and they had these heavy duty, like Churchill has, of waste management containers where all the residents are supposed to put their garbage in. Well, they're too lazy to walk over to that area and put them in the containers, and they're just leaving them out where they always did before, in between the buildings, and it's terrible.
The residents in the buildings are doing that?
Right.
Let me think about this, Don. I don't know the answer because we're not dealing with somebody that's it's not as if the apartment building isn't having the trash picked up enough, right? This is just the residents aren't putting it in the receptacles. Is that what's happening, Don?
Right.
Okay. I mean,
they're just laying them between the buildings where the cans used to be. Now they got rid of the cans, but now the people still will not put them in the special cans that they have for them. And they're just leaving them lay on the ground. And it's terrible. It's just a mess. So I just wanted to let everybody know on council, in case anybody gets any calls, I am working on it.
Maybe some sort of communication to the residents about the obligation. I don't know. But I'll think about it. We could talk offline, Don, see if there's something else.
Okay.
Do you think the landlord would get involved with something like this?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, communicating with the landlord or the residents and tell them you have to do this. Oh, Cecil, looks like Cecil has his hand up too.
Yeah, Cecil, yes.
Yeah, it can't be required the landlord to clean it up if the residents don't.
Cecil, you sound underwater. Cecil, we can't hear you very well.
Landlord,
I can't hear.
Clean this up even if the tenants don't. If they just put the trash out in between the buildings.
Are you saying is the landlord responsible? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, one way or the other. Can't the landlord be required to have his even if he has to pay somebody to come and clean this up on a weekly basis or however often?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the responsibility. That's who Mr. Branzell cited. That's who paid the fine, was the landlord.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, then why don't we send him a letter that says that he's responsible for having the trash out up one way or the other, whether he encourages his tenants to put it in whatever receptacles they have, or he's got to pay somebody to come and get it cleaned up.
I think ultimately they know that because we already cited them for it and took them to the magistrate. So, I mean, a little clearer conversation maybe with Mr. Branzell and the landlord might be worthwhile, but I think they understand that the responsibility falls to them because they've been held. What did you say, Don? It was a $1,500 fine?
Yeah.
Yes, he fined, Judge Caulfield fined him $1,500.
That's a lot of money to get a fine out of the first hearing.
There's 3 citations, 500 each.
That's still a lot. A lot of times they'll just read them the riot act and give them another chance. So this wasn't Caulfield, was it, Don, or was it somebody else?
Yes, it was Caulfield before he left office.
And now we have the rotating magistrate, so we don't know who we're going to have down there.
Okay. Any more comments on Trying to make a decision. I don't know, Steve. I guess we maxed out our abilities, have we? I guess there's nothing really left we can do.
Well, Dawn and I'll talk about it, and we'll figure something out. I mean, this may end up being a landlord-tenant dispute that we can't mediate
Yeah.
or get involved with, other than doing what Mr. Branzel's been doing. But we'll work on it. We can report back next month.
Okay, sounds good. Next was a committee business report. We really didn't have anything listed, but I'd like to ask Patty if she wanted to give us an update on the comprehensive plan, where we are and how we're doing.
Well, what's moving is the active transportation plan, which is before the Planning Commission. They have a steering committee that has been formed. It's met once. It's going to be meeting again. And we are filing a grant application for repair of at least some of the public steps. We're looking at the 4 that are in current use, even though they're in poor repair. And I was hoping to have an engineering estimate of the cost by tonight, but he said he isn't going to have it done till Thursday. The grant is due next Monday, the 15th. So I'll be working on that in the next few days.
Okay, thanks, Patty. Any other comments about anything? Okay, well, we're done, Steve. Thanks.
Okay, just a few seconds to switch over for me here, and I'll be ready if you would just bear with me. Okay, I'm fine with Finance Committee to start with the manager's update, if that's okay.
Yep, please proceed with the manager's update.
Okay, I have 4 items. The last 2 really are just continuation from previous months. The first one is cash flow. I was getting a report ready to give you for 2022, and there's nothing wrong, by the way, with the cash situation, but I did not print it for a couple of reasons. One, because when I looked at the cash for the first 2 months, it was showing a positive cash flow. I know this is going to probably sound ridiculous, but that's wrong. It can't be positive now. There's a couple of things wrong with which I mentioned here in my notes. One is the fact that I've been behind in getting the budget information in, and so consequently the treasurer was also behind in getting stuff in. And I know you're tired of hearing me say this, but this is the reason why I'm so concerned about the fact that I don't have a budget printed yet. It should have been done a month ago. It should have been done end of January. And with other priorities that were taking my time up, I was not able to get that done. This is the reason though why I emphasize that, because as being such a high priority, because it affects the reports you get, and consequently the reports you get may not be completely accurate right now because it took us a while to do that. And then of course there's also the transition to a new treasurer, which took a little bit longer than I thought it was going to take. And so consequently that also affected entry into the bookkeeping system and things like that. So the fact that we didn't have a budget right away meant they couldn't set up the bookkeeping system for 2022, because there's always some changes and obviously the numbers change. And the second thing was the transition to treasurer. Now I am working very hard to try to get this done, and I'm going to try to get this done before I go to that conference next week. And you already do have the spreadsheets. They are on the website, so you can see them. And that's now what the treasurer has to use. But that's the reason why there's no cash flow. What you should have in the first 2 or 3 months is negative numbers. And that's the reason why, just to explain to the new members, that's the reason why a lot of communities take out what's called a tax anticipation note. And the reason why we don't do that is because we borrow from ourselves. You pay interest, obviously, on a tax anticipation note to the bank. And so we consequently try to not do that. We do show interest, and I'm not going to really go into this in great detail now. We do show interest as we would have to pay back the fund that we borrowed the money from with interest, but that's of course paying the interest back to us, just one of our funds. So we have enough cash that we can borrow from ourselves. So you almost always have negative numbers because you're not collecting taxes until the beginning of April. And that's why the first quarter usually has negative numbers. So I will get you a better idea later. Cash flow is not as critical as the second thing I'm going to bring up, though, because all it's showing you is a picture of cash at a point in time. It's not showing you how much money you actually have in the bank necessarily right now or at that given point in time. It's just showing you what the situation looks like at a given point in time. It's a tool, it's a measurement. It's not something that should be the only measurement, though. Does anybody have any questions for me on that? I can explain that in more detail if you want. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Any questions? Okay, we're good.
No.
Okay, what I'm going to do is share my screen right now, I hope. I gave you a handout tonight with the agenda that I gave you called Understanding Forest Hill's Financial Reports, and the handout is 5 pages long. Excuse me, single spaced, and it's kind of detailed. So what I did was try to summarize it here in 10 PowerPoint slides. What I want to do is try to just give you a really brief tour of monthly reports to show you what the information is that you're going to be getting from the treasurer every month. You already got the first one for January a few days ago from the treasurer. And I think it makes sense that you understand what all these categories stand for. I think it makes sense to briefly explain that. So what I want to do is show you that. The first thing you get from the treasurer looks like what you see on the left, our letterhead and disbursements January or February or whatever for 2022. And it shows you how much was paid out from each of the different funds for that given month. And that's what you usually approve when you approve the bills at the business meeting. You approve this disbursement sheet. Now, that doesn't mean the bills have not been paid. In most cases, they are. Usually the checks are signed by 1 or 2 members of council, but there are some routine bills that council has given a staff authority to just pay so that we don't get penalized with delinquent costs or anything like that for being late. So what you see with disbursements usually is a summary of the total from each fund on that front page. It looks like the thing on the left, the top part of the thing on the left. And then you get a list of all the different bills and what some of the spending was all about on the next page. Okay, that's the first thing that you get. The second thing you get from the treasurer.
Steve, I have a quick question about the comment you just made.
Yeah.
Does it mean if my daughter is a lifeguard and she gets a paycheck, I can't vote on that? I mean, I have no control over her paycheck.
You probably, well, no, you don't sign it either because we're using a service. So there's no reason why you would have to. Now, if you were setting the salaries for your daughter, for example, that would be one thing where you'd want to abstain.
Which I did.
Yeah, and so no, there's nothing. If for some reason your daughter had expenses, you would not sign that check. You'd let Patty sign it, or the 3 of us here in the office, something like that.
Okay, got it.
So that's the first packet you get, the bills, the disbursements. Let me just go back to this page real quick. You get the heading page, the cover sheet with disbursements, reasons. You get a list of all the different things that were part of those disbursements and all the specific bills. The second packet you get from the treasurer is the monthly financial report, which gives you the bookkeeping information for all the borough's funds. Most of the payments come from the general fund. The basic budget is what's called the general fund. But there are a number of other funds that we also have, and you don't want to overdo the number of funds. We have probably about as many as you want to have right now, but there are a number of other funds that you get. And so these monthly financial statements, that's the financial report you get that shows you for a given month how much was taken line by line from each budget, or how much was received in revenue line by line from each budget, each fund, liquid fuels, Centennial, Capital 1 and 2, and I'll explain some of this stuff in a minute. This is something you should look at every month, even though it's detailed. And there's a couple of things you should pay attention to. Really the main thing you should pay attention to is the bottom line. How much have we spent? How much have we received in a given fund at that point in time? So for example, in June, at the end of June, we're through 50% of the year. So how much spending have we done for the year? How much revenue have we taken in for the year? That's not a great measurement, by the way, saying that you should only spend 50% of your funds in the first half of the year, but it is a benchmark that you can kind of look at and get an idea of whether that's something you should be concerned about. Most revenue, for example, comes in the first half of the year. So probably by the end of June, your revenue is going to be way above 50% for each fund. But a lot of expenditures are spread out throughout the year. So that's another thing you would want to take a look at. That gives you an idea of what line items we took money from, how much was spent on different payrolls and things like that. That's a lot of detail. So you'll see that heading, the sheet on the left, leading into a number of different spreadsheets that you can review with statistical information. And you can get more information, more background on this by reading my summary. I'm not going to go into all this. You can read most of that or ask me questions as we go. Does anybody have any question about what I'm saying with this? This is a second report you get from the treasurer. I should mention, by the way, when you're looking at budgets, you always try to look at the bottom line. A lot of people here, when I first started, would always take a look at each individual line item. And for example, just to take an example, Public Works might come up and tell me, I still have $1,000 I can pay to spend in supplies. That's how much is there. Well, just because the number shows that there's still $1,000 unspent doesn't mean that money is actually there. A budget's a plan. It's a plan, and it's something you work through, and it's constantly something you have to check and review. And that $1,000 may not be there if, for example, we had a bad windstorm, took down a lot of trees, and we had to spend more money on tree removals and less money. That way you want to spend less money on other things then to make up for it. So that's something else to pay attention to when you're looking at these line items. What's the total numbers that's spent and what is being spent in each line item? But again, realize that what you're looking at is a plan, not a guarantee of money. The next report you get from the treasurer usually is the earned income tax collection comparison report. The treasurer always shows you what we did last year, year to date, for each month, how much we took in this year, and what the total is year to date, and what the difference is this year to last year. That gives you kind of another measuring tool to see how well you're doing. Usually earned income tax, for example, should increase. Now with the pandemic, there was no guarantee of that. In fact, we were above what we budgeted, but not as above as much as we thought we were going to be. We were really close to what our budget number was. And it really should go up every year. So that's the second thing you'd want to take a look at. How is earned income tax collection? That is one of the big revenues after real estate taxes. It's important to take a look at. The next report that the treasurer will give you is the regional asset district report. That's the money we get as our share of the 1% sales tax in Allegheny County. And again, just like the earned income tax report, it shows you last year and the current year. Now I'm showing you, of course, 2020 and 2021 because we haven't really gotten very far into 2022. But it does give you an idea, again, of are we getting more money in from this regional asset district or less? And you might want to look at why we are getting more or why we're not getting more. The pandemic, for example, affected this greatly. And so there was less spending and less taxes taken out for spending from people who would buy a car or buy a CD or movie or would go out to dinner or what have you. And because of that, we took in less taxes. So that's another report you'll take a look at. Then the treasurer also gives you what's called the treasury report. And I'll show you what I mean by that on the next couple slides. And that's a list of all the borough accounts, the various bank accounts, checking accounts, what have you, and the dollar amounts that are held there at a given point in time. And they give you this every month. This actually may be a better view of cash than cash flow. So the treasurer's report will look like this. The top, you'll see usually the 4 checking accounts we have. General fund is the basic budget. Real estate is where real estate taxes come into first. And then they may get distributed later on back to the general fund, or they may get reserved for payroll. Payroll is where we separate money out to have every 2 weeks so we can pay the paycheck. So that money comes from the general fund, but it goes into a separate checking account. The pool improvement fund was set up a couple of years ago when the rec board started encouraging donations for the swimming pool to try to have money for improvements. Now that money is only spent at the discretion of council, not the discretion of the rec board, but council had agreed to that at the time. And so we put that money into a separate fund, a separate checking account in this case. So that's the top part of the treasury report. Does anybody have any questions for me before I go on? I have 3 more slides to show you. So I'm not gonna take a long time. No? Okay, then the next biggest part of the excuse me, of that treasury report are all the funds you see here on the left side. You see liquid fuels accounts. There's one in an organization called Pliget, and that's a Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust. That's what it stands for. Nonprofit, independent, that a lot of governments use to try to earn interest on money and also to help with spending or what have you. Liquid fuels has to be put into something separate as required by the state. We use Pliget to do that. And you'll see right there for, I think this is from January's report of this year, 299,000 plus is in there right now for liquid fuels. And then going down the list real quick are all the other accounts we have where we have money. American Rescue Plan is the money we set aside from the ARPA. We're not spending it yet until council decides. The bond issue has 2 different accounts, and you'll see that right below American Rescue and then down further a little bit when you see it in PA Invest. We split the bond issue money up because we want to have money handy that we can use whenever you decide to spend some of it. We also want to have the earning interest, though, as much as we can, even though interest right now is nothing. We still want to get something for it. So that's why we split it. The PA Invest is from the state treasury, and they help with investing municipal funds. It's a voluntary thing, but we've decided to use that. Council's decided to use that for years. It's been decades that we've been involved with that. Then you'll see there are several capital budgets. There's Capital 2, which shows you regular Capital 2 and a Capital 2 reserve. And Capital 2 is just another name for the corrective action budget. It's a shorthand name for the corrective action budget. And then there's Capital 1, which is a shorthand name for the capital improvements plan. We have a reserve in both accounts, and I can go into that more if you have any questions about that, but I did explain why we have a reserve on the sheet that I gave you with the detail on it. Now, below those numbers, I'm going to get this the left-hand side off of the screen just to have a little bit more room. There's the master fund that represents the accumulation of any kind of surplus funds we have over the years. They're invested in earning interest. The Fire Protection Services Fund, we use that to get funds from the fire fee because all those fire fee funds have to stay separated. We do not spend the money on anything but fire-related costs. And then the new 4,400 building fund, it's shown as PA Invest Money Market New Building in parentheses. You may remember last month I referred to the fact that we have a building fund. I want to explain this, take another extra minute to explain what I mean by this because the new members might not understand this. But about a year and a half ago, I don't know how to explain this simply, I guess. What we did when we built this building was we had a bond issue, but the money all got filtered through the general fund. So you would pay some of the bills out of general fund checking first, and then you would reimburse the general fund from the bond issue. I hope that makes sense because that's the simplest way I can explain that right now without going into more detail. Well, we got to a point in time where, you know, we had the general fund very solid, and we didn't really even need to reimburse it from the bond issue at any particular point in time. So I told council, there's things we haven't done in this building yet that I've haven't spent money on. I've been slow walking it just to see how things would go. And there are things under warranty that are going to expire that we're going to need to deal with. And that amounted to around $600,000 something. The number is on that sheet that I just showed you in the previous slide, and you can take a look at it.
171,834.
Okay. So I told council, if you don't want me to do this, stop me now, but I'm not going to reimburse the general fund. I'm going to keep that money in reserve just for costs at this new building. So for example, we just furnished the small conference room. If you go in there, next time you're here, you'll see different chairs and a different table, because the ones we had in there was old from the old building. They were falling apart. So for example, I didn't spend that money right away. I took it out of the building fund though. And there's other costs like that. We're paying for landscaping, for example, up here. That's coming out of the building fund. So I kept that money. I told council 3 times at 3 different meetings, because I'm always repeating myself, as you probably know by now, to stop me if you don't want me to do this. Otherwise, this is what I'm going to do. And they were fine with it. So it is on our minutes from a few years ago, and that council had no objection to this. And so that's what I've been doing. The next item is the solar panel item. Council is leasing the solar panels from EIS that we have on this building, because they didn't want to, with the changing technology, among other reasons, they didn't want to buy it right then. They figured down the road they'd have to make a decision, and so the best choice was to lease the panels now, and then down the road make a decision when we saw what the technology was doing. So what I told the treasurer, and I mentioned this also to council about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, whenever we have a surplus at the end of the year, put part of it into a separate fund called PA Invest Solar Panels, and we'll start banking money for down the road when maybe in 2025, council is going to want to redo all the solar panels that are there, buy them outright, for example, or put new ones up that we spend money on after the lease that we have right now is up, put it into a separate fund. That money is not something that anybody's going to do anything with the council. If you don't like what we're doing, if you think there's too much in that fund, you can always take the money out. This is something the treasurer and I did, and I reported to council about what we were doing, and council said, sure, that's fine. Because again, council controls all of this, nothing, all we're doing is holding on to the money and putting it in different pockets, different buckets. Patty?
Can I just elaborate a little bit on that? Because we have a 7-year power purchase agreement under which we lease the solar system for 7 years. This will have a residue at the end of that 7 years that will allow us to buy the system at the end of that 7-year period, and then continue a maintenance contract for a much smaller amount of money. And this fund that you see here will allow us to accumulate money that will be available to pay off the residual at the end of 7 years, which I think comes up in 2024.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I have 4 more things to mention, and then I'm done. No questions? All right, pension reserve. This is a newer fund. Back around 2014, 15, I'm sorry, 2015, 16, 17, and 18, the state allowed municipalities, if they preferred, to only fund 75% of their municipal obligation for pensions each year, something called the MMO, which we can go into in more detail now. I don't really want to take time on pensions because that's a very complex, complicated situation. But they gave municipalities that option. Just spend 75%, and then we knew that down the road we'd have to make that up somewhere after that 4-year period. Well, because the borough was not in bad financial shape, I told council that what I was going to do then was take the other 25% of that we owed and stick that into a reserve account, so that down the road, if we ended up having to pay more in pensions than we thought we were going to have, we have some money reserved, and that's what that's all about. So that ended in 2018, that 75% option. So there is still money there from this 25% that we banked. And that's what we use when we get our obligation every year to make up the difference, at least for right now, with what is owed toward the pension funds. The treasurer also uses that account to store funds throughout the year, so we have enough to pay it out. So there's a couple of different things that are in there, money that's stored there that we take from the general fund throughout the year, and also money from that 25% that we saved for those 4 years. Now, again, I know that may be complex or complicated, so I'll stop for a minute. Does anybody want me to explain that before I go into the last 3 points? Okay, I know we need more to talk about with pensions. We can get to that further. Let me go to the last 3 things. Another fund that we just kind of made up on our own is a real estate escrow fund. And you may think, why the hell is this guy making up funds? Well, back when 2013, there was a reassessment. The county reassessed all the properties. And at the time, they anticipated there was going to be a lot of appeals, and we would end up having to rebate or refund people money. So we set up a real estate escrow account to take into account the fact that our total assessed value went way up with that reassessment. So we held that on for a few years until we had to decide what to do with it. And eventually some of it was rebated back to property owners.
Right.
But I told the treasurer, keep the escrow fund open, and periodically throughout the year, as we have a little bit extra in 1 month or another from spending, throw some money into that fund. Okay, if we need it for an emergency, we have it. If we don't, we just put it back in to pay bills, that's fine. But if we need it for emergency, then council has that extra fund there. So we just use it as a storage thing that we use in case there is a lot of appeals or in case there is a problem. But usually at the end of the year, it goes back down to 0. And then the next year we start it again, putting some money into the fund, just holding it through the year in case we need it. And then at the end of the year, when we're short on cash because revenues aren't coming in, we spend it on the regular bills. And that way we don't have to worry about any tax increase or fee increase. The last 2 things, the road improvement fund, that's money that comes from the 1 mil tax. It goes directly into a separate fund. It's kept only for roads. We don't spend it on anything else. Council has that mandated in an ordinance. Well, actually, it's a resolution this year, but it's mandated that it's earmarked only for the roads. So from year to year, the money stays there. If we don't spend all of it in a given year on paving and related road work, then it stays for the next year. And then the last one, earned income tax, that account is used to get funds that's deposited by the Keystone Collections Group. And the Keystone Collections Group is the ones that are collecting the earned income tax right now. So the last thing I just want to point out to you is budget reserve. That's also on that list I showed you at the beginning here. Council approved a policy years ago to have a budget reserve that was equal to 7% of the general fund budget. Now, I explain a lot more in this sheet that I gave you, the 5-page summary about this budget reserve. But basically, I recommended to council back in the early 2000s that we didn't have any kind of reserve at all. And the state recommends that you have between 5 and 15% in reserve. They call it a rainy day fund. We call it a budget reserve. And I have more detail in that summary on that. So our goal is to have 7% there. What do you use that for? That's for emergencies. For example, the 1 year we had a major problem with the pool, as you may remember, we had to shut the pool down for major repairs. We used money from the budget reserve to pay for it to avoid a tax increase. And then over the next couple of years, we just replenished that money and got it back up to 7% of the budget. That was a council decision. So our current balance right now is $493,000. It's in there. I think that's equal to about 7.3% of the general fund budget. So we're a little bit over the target right there. but it's, again, money that the council controls. It's for emergencies or any other use the council wants to put to it. We also, by the way, when we get the rental for the park and ride at Avenue B, we put that money into the reserve too. Again, that's money you can take out at any time you want to. That's a council decision. So I wanted to show you this summary. I know this wasn't brief, but I wanted to explain it by showing you what the other reports look like that are associated with it, so that you have an idea of what each line item is about. This gives you more information. And if you have any questions throughout the year, let me know. But there's a good reason why we give that to you. We want you to know all the time how much money is there, so that every month you can see exactly how much cash we have and what the funds are and what their uses are. Does anybody have any questions about that before I go on to other things? Whoops.
Steve,
Yeah.
I do have a question. I know this is complicated and detailed, but wouldn't it be more beneficial, at least in my mind, to have a quarterly report rather than a monthly report, and also to streamline the report from what we're seeing now?
I say no, because when I came here, what I saw was streamlined. And when I came here, what I saw was people who, again, like I used the example, in September when we're short on money, all of a sudden somebody says, well, wait a minute, I still have $3,000 in this line item. I think it was because they weren't looking at numbers. They weren't seeing these things throughout the year. Other communities do the same thing every month. And I think I'd rather be as detailed and as open as possible, so that you see every single thing, every cent. I don't want to be a situation where we find that down the road somebody was embezzling money or something and nobody knew about it. This way you see everything.
Angelo, can I answer that? The treasurer's report is only a page and a half, and that's really kind of the top view numbers. You can take a look at this and get a quick overview. I should tell you, I personally look at every page of this 22-page report every month, and I do track it. And I know that in communities where the treasurer's report or the finance materials are not readily available, they're just a high-level summary, all kinds of shenanigans go on. You end up with all kinds of things happening, and there's a great deal of difficulty obtaining the transparency. I would rather have too much transparency. If this seems like a lot to you, you don't need to look at it, I look at it. But I think there are times when the citizens would want access to this information, and I don't want to put barriers to that happening.
Right. It's and I appreciate the answer. I don't think it's a question of transparency. I think there's some things that, and in the interest of time, I won't go into it, but I would like the opportunity maybe to speak with you about some of those things, and maybe
Happily.
just get things correct in my mind, and maybe let you know what I was thinking.
Okay, I welcome your thoughts.
I would say too, I think there's two reasons why the borough is in good financial shape. One is because you get all this detail. And if you're not looking at every single thing, somebody is, and that's okay, because you're not going to be able to look at everything every month. The other reason is because the borough tends to not spend money. If you spent all of what some other communities did, we probably wouldn't be as well off as we are. But I think the fact that you see all this stuff is what make sure that we have sufficient funds throughout the year. And we've only and I'm not saying this is my fault, my reason, but since I've been here, we only had a very small deficit one year. I forget what year that was now, but there was one year we did. And I think that's because we have all this stuff to check on. Yeah. Anybody else have anything? Okay, I had two more items I just want to hit on very quickly. Because there's nothing that needs to be done on either one of them right now. The first one is the ARPA fund. We're continuing this to keep this in front of you while you decide. So far, what's happened, this sounds like, when last we were watching NCIS, what happened, but well, so far what council has done is you've passed a motion that approved ARPA funds for the Alcoasand line, that's the regionalization line that we have to upgrade. So you've done that, and you've also said that you want to put the balance of the funds possibly toward the sewer fee, but more likely toward the general fund and possibly toward the rec lodge was one of the discussions. But nothing's been decided on that yet. The money is still there. As you can see, there's a separate fund for it. So I just kind of repeated all these notes here to keep them all in front of you on my report. And just to remind you again that right now you are allowed to spend the money on anything. So probably generally deciding to put it into the general fund as a formal thing so that when we're audited down the road, we can say that's the decision council made, but then from the general fund, spend it however you want. That would probably be the safest thing to do. But there's nothing that needs decided on ARPA right now. I just would want to keep you up to date and make sure you're looking at that. The last thing is the bond issue spending. Again, as a reminder, you've determined that we were going to use the bond issue funds, the extra money that was done when the bond issue was refinanced or refunded. You wanted to use that extra money on public works first, 3 vehicles in particular. And I have them listed here, the backhoe, truck 73 and truck 75. And I kept all my notes there so you could see the reason for that. And then following that, the money would go to the lodge, Westinghouse Lodge. Now, I don't have an exact number yet because, as you know, we're running behind in vehicles. Everything is short right now, as you know. And because it's hard getting supplies, we only have the 1 truck on order, the 73, and 75. We're still waiting for them to tell us they have a chassis for us. So we haven't really been able to do anything with that. So until we see, council had decided until we saw how much was actually left, we weren't going to start spending a great deal of money on the lodge. Doesn't mean you can't spend any of that money on the lodge. Obviously you can, but we didn't want to formally do anything more specific than that right now. So you need to just keep this in front of you. And as we get the money spent for the vehicles and see how much is left for the lodge, you can start then earmarking it, as well as the ARPA funds or whatever for the lodge for that matter, however you want to do that. So I just want to keep this in front of you. I'll have the same thing on next month without a big explanation probably as well. Does anybody have any questions for me about finance at all? Marcus?
Is there a deadline for the ARPA funds? Do we have to spend
End of
it by?
2023. You have to have it spent by the end of 2023.
So we could technically put it in our general funds and then move it to our rainy day fund.
Yeah, and you could technically do that and say, that's how we spent it. We haven't even gotten the second half yet. That won't come
Right.
probably till May.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have
But we
spent
could
the-
do that if we don't, I don't know, rush spending money because we have to, but I rather put it somewhere safe and then keep it there until we know.
The only other thing you have to worry about spending is the bond issue funds. As you know, you have to spend 85% of that in the first 3 years. But we're only in about year 2 right now. So you have another year and we're spending it. So it's not like we're not doing it. And you know, with all the stuff that has to go on at the lodge, we're definitely going to spend a lot of it there. I mean, you can use that on however, especially if you're going to tie the ARPA funds into that too. But just saying you're going to put it into, since you can spend it on anything, just say you're going to put it in the general fund. You can say, well, we did the general fund because we had police expenses and public safety expenses. They're all part of the pandemic. That's your rationalization, and you're good to go. And you don't have to worry about 2023. You have the money there, and if you spend it in 2024, you spend it in 2024. You know.
Well, if we get to the middle of 2023 and have not allocated all of it, we can always do that at that time. So I don't think there's a rush on moving it now.
I agree.
Okay. Is there
Any other
anything else?
questions?
Okay,
I don't have anything else to report then if nobody has any questions for me.
okay. Thank you, Steve. Do we have anything else under finance? I have one.
I didn't have anything else, but I don't know if you did. or Andrew.
I have observed that there is a grant cycle with a due date of May 25th that might allow us to get some funds from the DCED to do improvements on the Brinton Road corridor to upgrade the bus stops and walkways. It does require collaboration with one or more adjacent municipalities for this grant. It is a reimbursable grant, not a matching grant. I wondered if you could think about whether we should go in with Braddock Hills to do the upgrade of the bus stops and sidewalk access along Brinton Road, which is one of the more dangerous ones. Ardmore Boulevard has at least some sidewalks, and we already have a grant in motion for that. And the Greensburg Pike has sidewalks pretty much along its length, but Brinton Road does not. And it's pretty hazardous. I was driving there again today and it reminded me of the urgency. What is your instinct about doing a grant inquiry with an adjacent community? Do you have any opinions or preferences about that, about any exposure we might have for working with an adjacent community? Steve?
Can I just say one thing? Just remember that the Brinton Road sidewalk had come up about 2 years ago. I don't remember exactly. You might, before you start applying for anything, have the engineer take another quick look at that, make sure it's feasible, that that's something that will fit there. Lots of times too with sidewalks, those are things that are the responsibility of the property owner, not the municipality.
But there's
Not to
no
say that they-
sidewalk there at all.
Yeah, I know. Not to say that you can't do it. I'm just saying that that other places in the borough, that's responsibility of the property owner. So you just have to think about those kind of things and how you're going to rationalize all that. And also physically, can they fit there and will they be okay? You
Well,
might
one
wanna
of the
have them
options
look at
is to get a
early.
planning grant. And
Oh, well, that would
cover
sure.
the analysis and the engineering costs and such,
Okay.
and the design inquiry. So I was thinking of starting with a planning grant, and that would be the most logical place to start to develop,
Sure.
find out an answer to all those questions, because we don't know right now. So if you have no objections, I will at least put an inquiry in about whether it would be wise to proceed with that or not with our neighbors. We would need at least one other neighbor in order to qualify for this. I just wanted to let you know, if you have any opinions, please feel free to share with me. It'll be till May 25th we have to get this one done. Thank you. That's all we have for this committee.
Okay, I just need about 15 seconds to switch over and
Okay.
just bear with me. Mr. Erbaldinger, I'm okay if you want to start committee of the whole.
I'm good too.
Okay. Just have a couple of informational things more than anything else. The first one, I want to just raise this issue with you, not for discussion now, because it's personnel related. And it's something that probably the HR committee, after talking with Mr. Lawrence briefly today, and also Mr. Bioki at other times, probably the and the president, of course, from Mr. Erbaldinger, that we might want to have them take a look at first. But as we've been interviewing people, there's a couple of things about some of our policies that have come up, and Mr. Corbell's aware of this too. He's been involved in discussions as well. One is that we've been asked by the people who've been interviewing, do we require vaccines? And of course, we've told them, we don't right now. That the issue of whether or not you can require them for a new employee down the road is something that you may need to raise. What we require right now is just the things I have specified in my memo, or with my memos that I've issued on this, which says that if you're not vaccinated, you need to maintain distance and wear a mask while you're working. So if we were to hire somebody for the office here and they are not vaxxed, they would be wearing a mask while they're in the building and maintaining distance. The second thing that had come up by one of the interviewees was maternity leave. We don't really have, our policy manual was very old, from 1992 or 3. And that's the only one we have to use right now. So Mr. Corbell's advice, that's what we use. But there also are newer laws like the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, that would probably take precedence over our policy because our maternity leave policy is very poor. It's poorly written. And one of the things it says is, for example, if you go off to have a baby, essentially what it's saying is you go off to have a baby, you're no longer covered by our healthcare plan. I mean, it doesn't say that in those words, but that's how you read it. And this is, of course, from 93, 92, so that's ancient times. So that needs to be, of course, upgraded. And the FMLA covers us so that it would supersede what we have, but still, we need to do something. And then we also had one interview, we asked if we had a policy on whether or not people who have tattoos or piercings, would we hire them? And we don't have anything in a dress code that says you can't have a tattoo or you can't have a piercing. So of course, if somebody did, and actually the person who had this did have a small tattoo and did have a couple of piercings, one in nose and one in mouth. It wasn't anything. I've seen, much more intense piercings elsewhere, but we don't have a policy on that. I don't know that we need one, but that's just another reflection on how dated what we have in our administrative policy manual is. So we need to pay attention to that. And I just want to make sure you're aware of these issues that are coming up. That's why I'm reporting it. It's really not something for discussion in public like right now. For one reason, for example, because the interview process is for a employee who would be a member of a union. So you wouldn't want to discuss this now anyway. But I want to let you know that these are some issues we're working through and that our council is going to need to address. And we're going to hopefully have the HR committee along with Mr. Corbel working on some of these. Does anybody have any questions though for me on that real quick? The only other two items I have then is just an update from Three Rivers Wet Weather that came too late for Public Works last week. And what they're essentially talking about is the separate sewer system, municipalities like us, and what they're working on right now and what they're discussing at the various meetings they're having. So I highlighted just a couple of sentences, but you can read it. It's nothing too difficult to understand, and it's what they're working on right now for both separate sewer systems and combined sewer systems. And they do let you participate in meetings. Our engineer represents us. I do occasionally go to some, but in most cases, I just let the engineer do it, and the engineer either through Bob Ziskow or Dave Gillen would report back to you. Anybody have any questions on that?
I do. The Three Rivers Wet Weather is willing to come and give a briefing to council about the changes to the MS4 and updates, and also to do a community meeting using our guide to stormwater management for homeowners. I would be interested in having such a presentation at a future Public Works Committee or maybe an extended council meeting so that the public could benefit from this. I think you would find it helpful and interesting. I heard about it from the Alcoasand Advisory Board, which met a couple weeks ago, and I think our community would benefit from this kind of a program. So I would like to recommend that we get in touch with Three Rivers Wet Weather and have them schedule a public meeting.
Let me add to that. One of the requirements of our consent order is that we educate the public, educate you. And that's one reason why at Tree City Times, you see us repeat some articles on trash, on stormwater, on sanitary, because we're required to do that. Environmental advisory can do that as well, or a situation like this would be perfect for that too.
Yeah, but they've done some really interesting materials that are available both online and in handout form. I would like to schedule a meeting with them for our community. I don't know who was in charge of doing that sort of scheduling, but I would like to request that we do that.
Well, I can work it out with whoever, with Dave over at Three Rivers. It's just a question of one council agrees that you wanted to have it done either at a Public Works Committee meeting, committee of the whole, or business meeting. That's up to you.
I don't know. I would prefer to do it at a business meeting as a special presentation so any members of the public could listen to it, and we could have it come at the beginning of a meeting, maybe start at 6:30 and have it early, and publicize it to the public for attendance if they wanted to come. So this would come under your committee normally. If you would want to have it, in conjunction, that would probably be a good way to do it. I'm not feeling, yeah.
I actually think I don't want to use too much time up in meetings for those kind of things. I know it's informational, and I rather, I don't know, have a video you can download on our website or something like that. I don't know if people are really interested in that.
Well, we can put the manual on the website if you want.
Yeah.
It's available electronically.
But that's not really the point of a business meeting to talk about something like that at length, for educational purposes.
Well, you have some time if you want to think about it, and I would put this on the agenda for next month for Public Works Committee, if you want to
Could
talk
be on a
about it
public
there.
works. Yeah, put it on.
And then you guys can decide what you want to do, and then at May or June Public Works, or May or June business meeting, or whatever you could, whatever you decide. Do you want me to move it to Public Works?
That's
Okay.
Sorry, my mic was off. Yeah, move that to Public Works, please.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
I'll forward you this material then.
I have a copy from the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Or at least I kept the booklet, but if you have other literature in addition to that, I'd appreciate it.
That was just an invitation to come,
Oh.
an offer to come speak. I'll share this.
Okay. All right.
The only other thing I have for committee of the whole is I did attach the EMS report, which came too late for public safety last week. It's attached to this agenda so that you have an update on what they did last month. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Steve. So next we have solicitors report. Steve, you have something too.
Yeah, no, nothing really to report. I know we have several executive session type items that we'll be probably talking about after the next voting meeting, updates and whatnot. But for purposes of my report tonight, I'll just reference the email I sent earlier today with the street opening ordinance for folks to take a look at. We are able to advertise it for the 23rd if you would like. But if you wanted to take the time to review it and provide feedback, we have plenty of time to adopt it in April as well. In fact, I drafted it for April just to make sure we had enough time if folks want to take a look at it. We are waiting for an exhibit from Dave Gilliland, which isn't really, shouldn't materially impact your review, but as soon as we get that, we will forward it along to council as well to take a look at. Mr. Morris.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. Jimmy had asked me when something like that goes in effect. Does it only go in effect when you actually have voted on it? Because I remember at one time you had said something about an ordinance may go into effect earlier than that. And he was asking me because I guess the gas company has been talking to him about doing several street openings coming up soon, and he didn't know what to tell them.
Well, you're thinking about the pending ordinance doctrine, Steve, and that's for zoning matters.
Okay.
But if we were to say, the ordinance would go into effect upon the signature of the president of council and the mayor. So, if we advertised it for March 23rd, it would go into effect as soon as all those signatures were obtained. And if we waited till April, it would be until then. So,
I mean, it was an easy change. We went from half the street to the full width of the street. So I think
it's definitely not brain surgery, the ordinance.
Yeah.
There's really not.
I mean, that's why we pay you the big bucks that you do a good job in doing the ordinance. And so I think we should just go ahead and do it. Because I'm like what Jimmy said, we should have it implemented as soon as possible because we don't want to pass codes.
If you all direct me to advertise it for the 23rd, then Steve, I would say tell Jimmy, anybody that wants to do work on or after March 23rd, they should be prepared to do the full restoration. So if there are no objections, we will do that. Anna's on the meeting, and so she's taking a note. I won't have to call her tomorrow.
Did you write the ordinance or she did?
Anna drafted it. I made a couple revisions, and so I think the best way to put it is we collaborated together on the ordinance.
Okay, but I think we should not wait. We should implement it as soon as we can.
Okay,
Like
and that's what we'll do.
Me because we have no objections.
We'll do it.
You're done.
That's the end of my report.
Thank you. So next, the committee business report. I want to update council on a discussion I had with Steve Corbell. And basically, Annie, she wants, she's asking for 6 months at least. And she's getting antsy, and I understand and upset that we are so slow with her. And so Steve said, if council gives me the nod tonight, I can hire her, like I can sign a contract with her tomorrow, and then council has to ratify it at the business meeting next Wednesday. Is it next Wednesday?
Yes.
On the 23rd.
2 Wednesdays, yeah.
Yeah. So do I have any objections to that plan?
No objection.
Let's go ahead with that, please.
So Steve Morris, did you hear that? I will stop by tomorrow, and then tomorrow effective tomorrow, she will be full-time.
So the date in the agreement should say effective March 9th, in other words, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
all
what
right.
Steve Corbell said.
Okay,
Okay. Next, I named Jack to be our EMS representative. Somehow I forgot about that in January, so that's done. And then we had other committee business. So Patty, you wanted to talk about that Clarendon Coke Works letter,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is attached to the agenda.
I sent a revision around earlier today. This is a situation where our community is in the air plume of the Clairton Coke Works, as I'm sure you're all aware. We had 251 days in 2021 that were not good air. That means they were bad or terrible. And we are in a large coalition of communities and organizations that are urging the health department to adopt stronger standards within their existing regulation authority to limit the emissions from the Clairton Coke Works effectively. And that means I have given you a revised version by email today, which is not attached to your agenda because it has I did some research on the health effects of the kind of pollution that we experience, especially given that 25% of our population is a sensitive population, 3% children, 22% people in the elderly category, which are more sensitive to air pollution damage. And I have cited some specific air pollution studies that were in the National Institute of Health Sciences, well-documented cases from just recent literature to substantiate our concerns. I want to review with you the 4 things that we are asking the Allegheny County Health Department to do. One is to require the immediate closure of batteries 1, 2, and 3 to reduce their emissions by 17% immediately. These 3 batteries are over 70 years old. They should have been shut down years ago. They're grandfathered at emission levels that are 2 or 3 times higher than those legally permitted now. So everything other than those first 3 are under a more stringent standard. And there's no reason they should continue running those 3 batteries. Second, we're asking them to take action to make US Steel comply with local air pollution rules. Typically, they've had stipulation agreements, settlements. They typically send out fines. They just issued another $1 million fine. US Steel protests and doesn't pay the fine pending the appeal. And then half the time the appeal causes the fine to be adjusted and they pay a reduced amount and they keep polluting anyway. They just pay and keep polluting. So we're asking that they should not be relying on the self-reporting of emissions that is going on now. They want independent monitored emissions that go directly to the health department, and that they should have those ongoing emissions monitored on a regular basis, and then that they have they cease operation until the repair is made, rather than just pay and keep polluting. And that doesn't mean you shut down the whole plant, because if you monitor them at several different places, you can shut down just the facility that is affected. And then we're asking that they third enforce a compliance plan for bringing the chronic emissions into compliance with the emissions orders. Right now, they just allow them to continue emitting and promising, and they don't ever actually do the repairs. They just promise and promise, and it's never enforced. We need the new permit to be enforceable. And then the last one is that we want them to update their air permit regulations and standards for more modern requirements. And I think that is not, and I have elaborated all of this in more detail. I want to incorporate by reference the technical comments of the Environmental Integrity Project, which hired an engineering firm to do a technical review of the permit. I'm not going to go into the line by line permit amendments that they're proposing. It's like 32 pages, but I would like to support that technical review by reference in our testimony. So I would ask that you allow me to sign this as Vice President of the Forest Hills Borough Council on behalf of the council, not just as an individual, and to file an appeal on behalf of the health and welfare of all of our citizens.
Any comments on that by anyone else?
Barbara.
Bob.
I would just like to say I wholly support Patty's letter, and I would like to see this go forward. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay.
I personally question a little bit if that will help, but obviously there's no harm in doing something like that. So I'm okay with it. All right, so that's good. Next we have.
I also support the clean air direction. I think that's very healthy, and these airs have been polluted for years.
Yeah.
So Patty, I really hope that, we can get some justice. My family years ago used to put the clothes on the line and take a broom and beat the soot off the sheets, the sheets and stuff.
We've come a little way from that, but 251 days out of 365 with bad air, to me, is
Yeah,
we still have a way to go,
I know. Thanks, Patty. I think that's one.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So next we have the ban shell, which comes from Borough Property. Bob, do you want to start that, please?
Yes, thank you. It's very exciting to be a part of the planning of the band show, and that's going to be a nice addition to the Forest Hills residents for the movie nights and bands playing. The council just received a PowerPoint display, and it indicates removing the existing pavilion as well as the brick grille for the placement of the band shell. The pavilion and the brick grille, though, they're used by people that rent the Westinghouse Lodge, and they're used to using them as part of their payment fee. I wonder at this point that sort of becomes a subtraction to the idea. I wonder if perhaps the grill, if it's moved, instead of just being knocked on, could it be moved and rebuilt as well as the pavilion? I know that, go ahead, Mr. Morris.
We were going to take it down anyway and put in 2 standalone grills before we knew about the band shell. So that was already being planned prior to knowing about this. We just haven't gotten around to it yet, but so that shouldn't be a problem.
But I mean, those standalone grills, they kind of don't look nice. I think we at least have to have something like when private homeowners, they have like a built-in barbecue and some kind of, it doesn't have to be as big as the existing structure, but those standalone grills we have on the, like on our other shelters, picnic shelters, I don't think they would fit very nicely. So just want to make this point. Sorry, Bob, for interrupting.
Oh, no, that's fine. I want to hear what everybody has to say. And I just think that if the residents are used to this and consider it part of their fee, that if it's changed too drastically, I don't think that would be very satisfactory. Additionally, I looked at what was listed for the size of the band shell, and I wasn't quite sure. It had 30 to 40 feet width, 14 to 24 height. It just, I wasn't sure if it was more on the smaller side or the larger side. The 40, it just seemed kind of large for in that area. So I wondered if anybody had thoughts to either move it to a different part of the Westinghouse Lodge, perhaps a different park. I like the idea of it. It just seems like there's still some questions that need answered. Oh, Angelo?
Yeah. I think there's a number of pros and cons to putting it in the Westinghouse Lodge area. But I think if one of the things, if that's going to be the site, the pavilion as well as the barbecue grill should be moved, and that should be incorporated into the project. I think that makes sense to do it that way. That way it's, we're assured of it being relocated. I think there are some other issues on that site. We need to make sure that that's going to need electric to that band shell. We don't know what the electric service coming into the lodge is, whether or not it's sufficient to support that. And I'm not sure if there's electric going out to the pavilion now, but as long as
There's actually a light post, so there is some electric,
There
but
is light
on it
so, I
out.
mean, like electric within the pavilion itself.
Yeah.
So if they want to
But
put
it
lights,
could be that it's not enough. You're right.
right. So all that should be considered to be incorporated into that project, again, assuming that it's going to stay at that particular location. And then I noticed from the newer drawings and submissions that some other things have been included, like landscaping and so forth and so on. But I think it needs to be more of a comprehensive presentation so that we have all the information that we need in order to make a decision.
I also question the removal of that one tree, because I noticed when we were doing our concerts in the parking lot, people were trying to sit under the trees to get out of the sun. And unless it's going to be, structurally impeding the location of the thing, I would just as soon leave it there and let people sit under it and, walk around it.
I think that tree is right in front of the band shell,
Yes.
from what I've seen, which would
I think, I think it's a line of sight issue there.
Yeah, it
Warren,
would
about
impede the
having-
view of the folks looking at the band shell. I think that's the reason for the removal.
And then there's one other concern I haven't heard today yet. Like, we are renting that out solidly every weekend night, I think every Friday, Saturday, Sunday from May through September. So there are some concerns that people will be annoyed if we do like those. I heard two different stories. I heard like 3 weekend nights a month, but Jackie Dempsey says only 3 weekend nights a summer, which obviously is a different story. So I think it's the gist of the whole thing. We don't know enough. We have no proper planning, proper pictures, drawings. We just need to do more, including like a discussion on why the Westinghouse versus the main park or the lawn at the
Or the
pool.
pool. Yeah.
So
I was interested in why they didn't put it at the pool lodge, because there would be space there, maybe less parking. I don't know. We don't have a pros and cons analysis of all the possible locations.
and I think that
Do you know if there's a time limit on their grant for this
I
particular?
don't think they do, as
Okay.
far as I heard. But I think, Bob, if you could collect all those feedback we heard tonight and from Cindy and all other people, just give them a list of feedback. We need to know more, like Angelo, that pros and cons about each side and more details on. They said they want to make it sustainable wood. I heard some people avoid about a glass, modern glass, metal structure going in there. I don't think that's the intent. And I do trust the people, like the old CDC put those ugly arches.
Yeah,
on
we don't
top.
want that again.
Exactly. I do think that Jackie and her board have more taste, but at least we should know what we're getting. before we say
Well, I
anything.
was thinking the process that we used for our borough building, we had several community meetings with design charrettes and a lot of discussion. I'm not sure they need to go anything quite that elaborate, but I think some community input is probably appropriate, even if it's just
Yeah, we have to be,
council
if
committees.
Steve Corbell, if a CDC type organization does something like that, how much rights do we have? Because I think we have to be separate from them.
Yeah, we can only ask. We can't force them.
Yeah, but we can ask for more details.
Oh, for sure.
Like we
Absolutely.
can't say paint it
It's our
black.
property too, so we do have the leverage that they want to put
Exactly.
on the property. So, I don't see why they wouldn't want to work with everybody here to make this, if it's going to happen, the best.
Yeah, but the
can be for
PowerPoint
community.
was done in October, and I'm surprised that we have never seen it. That
Exactly.
sitemap Dave Gillian drew up was in December. Again, I wish they would have involved us in more detail earlier. Steve Morris, you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't want to cause trouble. I'm just asking a question. I know when we did, because well, anyway, I am always causing trouble. I know in the past, when we've had concerts up here, we've used the ball fields, because even though they're used a lot for baseball, they're not always busy. Is it possible, or would it make any sense to put a band shell over there? Again, I know this has gone through. I don't want to cause any trouble. I'm just throwing that out. I know we've done that with concerts before. I didn't know if that made any sense to do for concert and movies. And
I
things
actually
like
had the same thought as well. And then, as long as it doesn't interfere with baseball, like the structure getting whacked by balls all the time. Obviously, baseball field and balls, you don't want to get it destroyed by fall balls or whatever it's called. But yes, I was thinking it would be right next to the Westinghouse. So
I think there's probably enough open dates to schedule around that. I don't know. And on the one ball field, you have lights, so you have the advantage of being able,
Yeah.
well, I don't know how easy does it turn them on and off. I shouldn't say that.
That's what I'm
but,
missing
you know.
as well, like a whole thorough analysis. What are the various sites we could consider and why not, what pros and cons. But I heard, like someone said, like Cindy's concerned, Cindy is not a decision maker, but us as council, I think we need to listen to our employees, because Cindy is the expert in renting out the Westinghouse Rec. So I think we do need to take her concern seriously. So, and I
Yeah,
try to
this is Jack.
stay out of the fire line by actually us taking on the concerns.
I'll
Did you
just add,
say
if I may.
something, Jack?
Hang on, Jack, you
Yeah.
first.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like us to back up a little bit. And one of the things that's coming clear here is there was an immediate assumption that the appropriate place was the Westinghouse Lodge. And I think we should revisit that basic assumption. I mean, what Mr. Morris brought up is something even I had not thought of. We've got the pool lodge area in front of that, and we've got a very large park. When I went up to the Westinghouse Lodge on Sunday to look at the space, one of the things that occurred to me was in front of that band shell, you've got a pretty narrow space for people to sit around and view it before you hit Barclay Avenue. So I'd like us to revisit the actual site location of the band shell, and then if we do pick the Westinghouse Lodge, I think there's some very good questions that have come up, particularly that fireplace pit grill thing. Most of the summer, people are going to want to be using something like that that's both attractive, and they want to cook outside. They don't want to go into that kitchen if they rent the lodge. So I think we should slow down and really look first at the location, and then second, what's the impact if we do put it at the lodge as opposed to other locations? Because we are hitting on something we are renting out constantly. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I agree. So I would suggest that Barb, and I will help her if needed, she will basically put all those comments in one letter email and then send it back to Jackie. So Barb, are you okay with that? I'm happy.
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am. Mhm.
Good. And yeah, I think we just need more time. I'm not necessarily, I don't want to make any decision today, and Cindy, for example, told me like lots of weddings, particular, they actually have cicada set out in that pavilion. They do the cooking right there, and then they serve it's part of the whole structure. the whole facility. It's an important part, according to Cindy. But yes, so I would propose that Barb, and I will help her if she wants to, put up a whole list with all the concerns we heard, and then we give it to Jackie, and then hopefully they come up with more information. All right, that's it for that.
Thank you.
The next one, we had a, I don't know how to say it. Last week, we had some discussion about police personnel, and technically we were completely right. Council does all the hiring and firing of the police department. So our HR department, like what we proposed with Jack, Angelo, and inviting the chief, would be perfectly fine to do the discussion. I had a call with Frank afterwards, and he's very adamant he needs to be part of that. But at the moment, Angelo is out of town anyway, and I think those kind of meetings are better to done in person. So I want to buy some more time, talk to Frank more, and then maybe if Frank really insists, maybe we have myself and Frank joining our HR department, but committee. But I don't think there's a need to blow that meeting up into too many people. But I will, at the moment, Angelo is out of town, Frank is busy with something, so I want to buy some time, but look into it further. That's
First
all
of
I
all,
have to say about that.
may I say something? I think first of all, Frank's wife has had a stroke.
I didn't
So,
want to talk about that in
I know.
public.
and secondly, I think we need to include the mayor. He is in charge of the police. They do report to him. And that is a consideration that I think weighs rather heavily on personal decisions. And I don't want to do around him on that.
I don't,
Just my opinion.
legally, we do the hiring and firing. So legally, I do want to include him, but I don't necessarily, he's talking to Chuck probably a lot, almost every day, I think. So, he could send Chuck as his representative too. But again, I will take it offline, talk to Frank, talk to the committee, and we will see what we do. But legally, we do all the hiring. Council has to decide if we want to hire a full-time person or not. It's us to decide that. Same thing when we do the negotiation. Frank is usually there in the executive meetings when we discuss the details like pays and stuff like that. But he's not part of that discussion. Us, council decides all that kind of things. But I'm happy to have him involved to some degree. I just need to figure out, talk to him.
Could
after some
Frank,
time.
could Frank tell us or suggest to us certain people that he feels strong about?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, if Frank says, I like candidate A and B.
No, Frank
can-
doesn't even have any, no one has
No,
any.
no.
say. They have the
So, I
civil
mean,
service.
he's not choosing, but he's telling
I mean,
us which ones he
Yeah,
likes.
we shouldn't, I think we should take it offline because it's getting into like.
Oh, okay,
executive.
all right. Okay,
So,
It's a civil service process anyway. It doesn't matter who likes who. It's a test.
council only has to decide if, let's say, someone retires, do we want to hire a full-time officer, yes or not? That's totally council's decision, has nothing to do with Frank. He may have an opinion and he should express his opinion, but it's our decision ultimately. But yes, I
Okay.
want to take it offline. I'll try to do it
Okay.
amicably.
okay, I agree. Okay,
Yeah.
Marcus, I agree.
I
Okay,
just want to remind everyone that the whole idea of this, of us doing that was to just understand what the issues were. So we weren't talking about hiring, we weren't talking about any of those details. We were just trying to ascertain what the issues were.
And to learn, because
Yes.
you don't know.
okay,
Exactly. What is the budget implication and things like that? But again, my goal is to solve it amicably. We have some time, and I think I can fix it, but we will see. That's it, I think. Anyone else has anything?
Yes. I do have an appeal. We've received a lot of documents today, a few hours before the meeting. And I would like to make an appeal that if we're going to get a lot of documents for any particular meeting, that we try to get them with as much lead time as possible in the future.
I was actually one of the culprits. I agree. I got it last minute and I just passed it on, but you have a point. I should probably say, okay, it's too late. I shouldn't take it anymore. but you have a point.
What documents? You mean the stuff I sent you?
Everything, yeah.
Well, you
I
know,
sent like the
I-
drawings.
people are changing things up to the last minute. I'm working on it and, you know, if I send you something early, there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's off, that's not on there. And I don't know how right now, how I can get it to you early and still have it current enough that it would help.
Well,
I mean, before we did this, you wouldn't get them until you came to the meeting when we were doing them live.
Which would be even worse. I mean, I'm just saying, where possible, it would be nice to have the documents in enough time to be able to read them, digest them, and then be able to come to the meeting so that we can make an informed decision.
You have a point, but
Remember
Steve
when I,
has a point too.
remember when
In
I
the
said
past,
that
when we had
things would be
live committee
different?
meetings, the attachments were just on our table, so we didn't have any time to look at that. We like some financial reports, they were just attached to our agendas. All right, but I think you have a point. Anything else? All right, so we're done for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Business meetings on March 23rd. See you then live.
Okay, thank